Hello, everyone, and welcome to this introduction to this week's podcast. I'm home. I'm home alone. I'm about to get back on the road, although not in my Airstream. I'm heading to eastern Montana to do a second canoe trip. This on a part of the Missouri River I've never been on. So that's this week, and I hope you find it interesting. It's really interesting to me to try to begin to summarize all of what I've learned. And I think the main thing I've learned is, there are many, but the main thing I've learned about RV campgrounds is that they're not representative of America. Well, these things cost money. Most Americans don't have the leisure or the funds to do this sort of thing. And believe me, my rig is a very, very modest one compared to what's out there. So please join the Friends group and join the book club. We're having a great time. The next book is coming up. It is Short Nights of the Shadow Catcher about Edward S. Curtis, the photographer. It's very accessible. Short book by the great Timothy Egan, a New York Times writer and columnist. So, he writes in a language that reads like a novel. The life of Curtis is fascinating. He took some of the greatest photographs ever taken of Native Americans. He took 40,000 dry glass plate photographs in the course of his life, and then he produced the 20-volume North American Indian, which is considered one of the greatest publication projects in American history. Absolutely gorgeous, great ethnographic work, really just a showcase of his enormous talent. And so that's coming up. I talked a little bit about next year's travels in that. I might also be traveling in the wake of Theodore Roosevelt next year, national parks, national forests, national game preserves. I passed one up near Flathead Lake, and it broke my heart, but I had to get home. National wildlife refuges, national monuments, etc. So we'll see, but I'm planning all of that. So anyway, please join the Friends group, the book club on Curtis, and then after Curtis we'll be talking about the Colorado River, a newish book on John Wesley Powell and the Colorado, continuing the river exploration theme. And then finally, we'll be reading Fool's Crow, a novel by James Welch, who was a Blackfeet literature scholar, now deceased, at the University of Montana. One of the greatest books I've ever read, certainly the greatest novel of the Native American genre. Just unbelievably beautiful. You must read it. So join the book club. All you need to do is sign up for the Friends group at a slightly advanced level, and there are all sorts of other emoluments. So let's get started. Let's go to the show.
Hello, everyone. This is Nolan Johnson, your producer and editor of Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. Welcome to this episode, and today Clay talks about his 2025 trek across America in his 23-foot Airstream following the Lewis and Clark Trail. I tagged along with Clay in a few different spots across the country. We started in Virginia, moved on up to Pennsylvania, down to St. Louis, up the Missouri toward our home state of North Dakota, out into Montana, where we spent some beautiful days on the Missouri River, and eventually out to the coast on the west side of this great nation. Today we have Clay on his way home to North Dakota, what he is calling a bittersweet homecoming. We're going to walk through his life as an RV drifter, and you can hear what it's like as he jumps from mom and pop campsites to KOAs and everything in between, and maybe even a Walmart parking lot. He speaks about his intensive study of the journals of Lewis and Clark and his book that he has tentatively titled Getting Noticed on the Lewis and Clark Trail, one of the things he plans to write after this year of searching the trail. Let's go to Clay now as he brings us home and tells you what he's up to after his trip across the country.
Hello, everyone. It's Clay. I'm home. I'm at my kitchen dining room office. By being a rusty, fusty, musty old bachelor, I live alone, therefore, and I'm able to use my entire house as a library and office. I'm working on a whole range of things, getting ready to leave tomorrow for eastern Montana. My plan is to get to Fort Benton, our second Lewis and Clark canoe trip this year. I did the first trip from Coalbanks Landing to Judith Landing. That's part of our annual Lewis and Clark Cultural Tour, which I've now done 25 times. I've always wanted to do the next leg and have been encouraged to do it by my friend Wayne Fairchild, So this year, because it's my Lewis and Clark year, where I'm giving myself to Lewis and Clark as really never before, I wanted to do this section of it, and I invited a group of people to consider coming. They're coming. We have about 14 of us. We're going to have special food. I can't wait. And I've asked each person, this is what's really going to be interesting, to me at least. I've asked each person to bring a passage from something that is a window on their own way of seeing the world. So it'll be really interesting to see what people choose. How do you see life? All of us are in our 50s, most of us in our 60s, a few in our 70s. We've had a lot of time to think about life. So what, if we had to choose a passage from something, what might it be that would show to the others how we see life? So off I go. And we'll be aided with an outfitter, my dear friend Wayne Fairchild, but it's a stripped down crew and it's a stripped down set of gear. The idea is to rough it a little bit more and not be quite so caught up in the amenities. I have just finished this unbelievable Lewis and Clark tour. I need to sit down and write the book that I've been working on, or thinking about at least, for a long time. And the working title is Getting Noticed on the Lewis and Clark Trail. It's about how things get written up in the journal. So, for example, today I just saw that a man named Potts, who was a minor member of the expedition, very seldom talked about, was cutting through brush, and he had a long knife, they called it, probably some sort of a machete, and he cut himself very severely in the leg. That gets written up. If you get hurt, if you are disabled, even for a short time, that's likely to get written up. If you approach death, if there's some concern that you might die, that's worse. So who almost died? William Bratton had a very severe lower back problem that really made him incapacitated at Fort Clatsop, out on the ocean, all the way up to the Walla Walla people. So, and for a period of time, and Lewis writes about him every day or every other day. Bratton's still ill. Bratton no better. Would apply to poultice to Bratton's back, etc., trying all of the remedies in their very limited medical kit with their very limited medical knowledge. And Bratton doesn't get better. He's finally fixed or cured by physical therapy. He does a sweat bath up near the Nez Perce, and that seems to alleviate the problem. But Lewis feared that Bratton would not recover. Lewis feared that Bratton would either die or be incapable of continuing the journey. And you have to wonder what they would have done if he couldn't walk, couldn't do anything. Would they have carried him into the boats, carried him to the campground, brought him food, or would they have? What would they have done? It's one of those imponderables. It's impossible to imagine them abandoning him, but it's also very difficult to imagine them carrying on with an invalid. So he's one. Second is Sacagawea. She came close to death, at least in Lewis's view, from some sort of gynecological issue, probably some sort of terrible uterine infection. Lewis sort of says in veiled language that if she dies, it's Charbonnel's fault. Well, that could mean a lot of different things, of course, because he didn't take proper care of her during this time. So she nearly died at the Great Falls, and that's a sort of a famous incident of the expedition. And then Lewis was shot in the buttocks on August 11th, 1806, on the return journey. He was out hunting with a man named Pierre Cruzat, who was totally blind in one eye and nearsighted in the other. They were dressed in the skins of animals, elk or deer. Lewis shot an elk as he was pursuing it to finish it off. He was shot in the buttocks, and he said, "Damn you, you have shot me," knowing, I think, that it was probably Cruzat. But Cruzat did not reply, and a whole sort of drama ensues until finally they discover there's no Indian attack, no attack by indigenous people, and that Cruzat is brought forward, and he sort of reluctantly half confesses, saying that he shot what he took to be an elk, but he couldn't be entirely sure. So those are at least three. Lewis also fell early on in the expedition. He also got arsenic or some other chemical poisoning early on in the expedition. One man nearly drowned when he was swept off the canoe by overhanging branches. Lewis says that a number of the men couldn't swim. And then Charles Floyd actually died. One of the three sergeants, a young man, a favorite, died early on August 20th, 1804, near Sioux City, Iowa. So if you add up the number of people who were seriously ill and might have died or did die on the expedition, it's a considerable number. That's the way you get noticed on the Lewis Clark Trail, and so on. Anyway, that's a book that I have been working on in my mind and taking notes on for a long time, and this year I really concentrated on it, and now I'm ready to write it. And if I did nothing, if I just sat right here at this table, I have a huge Lewis and Clark library, and I'm not afraid to order more books, especially if I could, in some self-deceiving way, call it work, professional development. I should do that. If I sat here from September 1st until January 1st and did very little else, I could probably finish this book. But I won't be doing that. I'll be on the road. I'll be writing every week for Listening to America. I'll be doing video. I've got some lectures to give around the country. I'm going to England in November to see my daughter go through the graduation ceremony at the Sheldonian Theatre in Oxford, which I did long ago. It's a lovely Latin costumed sacramental event, and I can't wait to see her preening, I hope, having received her DPhil, her doctorate in history from Oxford, and her fiance, Simon, will be there, and his parents. And then in December, I'm going with a friend to Rome for a week because I love Rome, miss Rome, and the reason I'm going is that my friend Ed Watts, and if you're a frequent listener to this program, you know who he is. He's written a book called The Mortal Republic, which is about the dying of the Republic in the last century BC and the first century CE. And then he has got a new book that'll be out in October, so I'll have it, and it's a vast history of Rome. I can't wait to read that. He's really a cool guy. And we're giving a talk in Vail, by the way, in January or early February about whether we are Rome. The answer is yes, probably. High-tech Rome. And we're not, it's not a one-to-one correspondence, but we are sort of in the political violence stage of American life now when the Republic is breaking down. We have both parties have moved towards a unitary executive. And so are we Rome? Yes, we have gladiatorial contests. Football season starts next week in America. College football already. 70,000 screaming fans in identical red T-shirts in the Texas-Ohio game yesterday. People, you would say making fools of themselves if it weren't an innocent fun to be screaming at the top of their lungs and gesturing and bringing handmade signs and forming, all sorts of phalanxes and et cetera, et cetera. So we have our bread and circuses. We have professional wrestling. In fact, next year, during the 250th birthday of the country, President Trump plans to have a cage match at the White House. So, that'll be a first. The Secretary of Education is a former executive of the WWE. He is going to be giving a talk, this Ed Watts, at a conference in Rome in December. And when he told me that, I said, would it be possible at all if I came there for us to have half a day together or a hike together? And he said, yes. So I'm going. I can't wait. We're going to walk the Appian Way. I suggested one restaurant. He said, no, there's one that's in the old Theater of Pompey, which is mostly gone, but that's a really important part of Rome of the late Republic. He has a restaurant there. I have another one that I love near the Vatican, which is my favorite Roman restaurant. And then on to Florence, too, because you cannot go to Italy. You cannot go to Italy without seeing the David. I repeat, there is one and only one infinitely magnificent statue of a human being in the world. And there are lots and lots of runners-up. But Michelangelo's David is essentially a piece of human artistic perfection. I've seen it 5 or so times. I would never go to Italy without seeing it. As you sit there, you almost wonder that it doesn't walk off the pedestal. It is that good. It's going to be a great autumn, and I am so excited about all of it. But that means the book will probably take longer to write. So my hope is to have it done. My hope is to have it done by the time I leave next year on my third season of Airstream Travel.
Thank you so much, Clay, for giving us some insight into the trail this year. We need to take a short break. We will be right back with more Listening to America. Welcome back to this episode of Listening to America. We are on the trail in an RV with Clay Jenkinson, learning about day-to-day life in mom-and-pop campgrounds, KOAs, and maybe even a Walmart parking lot. I'll let Clay pick it back up as he describes what a day in the life of an RV drifter is like when you're pulling a 23-foot Airstream across this country following the Lewis and Clark Trail.
I'm really thinking hard about what I still want to accomplish in my life. I've written 13 books. I still haven't rung the bell. I don't know what that even means, but I have a sense of it. And so I want to get at least 3 more books completed in the next 10 years. And many places to go. I've never been to Belfast. I want to go there. I've never been to Prague, of course. I've been to Munich once, but not nearly long enough. And I think every person of the first world who has the wherewithal to do it must see Auschwitz or Dachau or one of them. Similarly, although I'm not greatly interested in Japan, I think every person who can should see Hiroshima or Nagasaki. These are really important benchmarks of the arrogance of science, the madness that is often at the center of human nature, what Freud calls the thanatos impulse, of the self-destructive, destructive darkness that is in us and in all of us, but collectively in us from time to time. Just look at Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine, a thing of such brutality that we haven't seen anything like it since the Second World War, and yet he's getting away with it, and he's going to get away with it. The world is going to force peace, and that means that he will have gobbled up a chunk, maybe up to 20% of Ukraine. And although we will then make pledges of security, which we have done before, if he lives, if his successors are just like him, they won't be done, because he believes, and I think he honestly believes, that Ukraine is part of Mother Russia and that it must be reincorporated into the Russian Empire, at least provisionally, at least as a supine client state, and if possible by general annexation and the obliteration of that which is distinctly Ukrainian. Try that, Vladimir Putin. Way to upset a people. Try to destroy their sovereignty. Well, we know something about that, don't we, here in the United States? Just ask the Lakota, the Nez Perce, the Shoshone, the Crow, the Blackfeet, the Assiniboine, the Ojibwe, etc., etc. So I'm home, doing laundry, unpacking the Airstream, packing for my canoe camping trip, getting ready for my visit to Kansas City for the Lewis and Clark event. I'm going to be interviewing Rob Epps, E-P-P-E-S. He's a lineal descendant of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson had 2 daughters, Maria and Martha. Martha had 12 children, 11 of whom lived. Maria had 2, and she died of complications from birthing her second child. But her son Francis lived. Jefferson deeded Poplar Forest to him later in life. Francis went on to Tallahassee, where he became one of the founders of what would become Florida State University. Interesting cat. And I'm very much interested in talking with this lineal descendant. I was invited to do it. I actually knew nothing about him until then. And we're planning to talk about a range of subjects. I need to get ready for that. So, such is my life. And I am digging around, finding all the things I need to get on the road tomorrow. It's Labor Day today. I've got a meeting with my videographer here in 2 hours. I need to do just a wee bit of shopping if the shops are open, as of course they are. It's a capitalist nation, even in family-centered North Dakota. I hope to get a good night of sleep. Tomorrow I will get up and have a quick meeting with my scheduler, and then I will drive north. And so, because I've driven the other route so many times recently, that is I-90 and 94 west of Bismarck through Dickinson, Medora, Webo, Glendive, Miles City, Billings, Bozeman, Butte, and on up to Missoula. I do that many times per year now. I've probably done it 50 times in my life. I'm going to go the northern route. So I'm going to go north from Bismarck to Fort Union, up on the nearly the Canadian border at the confluence of the Yellowstone and the Missouri. I have a young friend there that I'll try to see for an hour or so. And that's a very important Lewis and Clark site where I'll do a little audio and video. And then I will go to Fort Peck Dam, which is the first of the great main stem dams on the Missouri. I've just written about that. You'll see it in the newsletter that's just passed. And after that, I will make my way through Highway 200 in the north central Montana, all the way out to Fort Benton, where our small group will gather at the Grand Union Hotel, a historic hotel in Fort Benton, and off we go on the second canoe trip of the year. So much to read, so much to write, so much to know, so many places now I want to go back to. I have had just an extraordinary 2025, and it's going to be an equally remarkable 2026. Fall is in the air here. When you go out in the morning, you can sense the autumn coming. It's my favorite time of the year. I love the turning of the cottonwood leaves, and my goal is to keep the Airstream going long enough before the hard freeze so that I can go to the Badlands, both the north and south units of Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and also to the Burning Coal Vein campground down near Amadon, North Dakota, for a couple of nights, just to have that wonderful autumn experience when the cottonwoods are as beautiful as anything on earth. And everyone loves the aspens in Colorado, and they are magnificent. But the cottonwoods of the Great Plains, when they're at their best, makes your knees sag. It makes you want to cry. They're so achingly beautiful. So I will do that, and then I will winterize the rig thoroughly. Last year we did it, but it turns out there was a pipe that burst, so we can't let that happen again. I put it in storage for the winter. I may go on some trips this winter. For example, I need to get to Hohenwald, Tennessee, not so far from Nashville, to complete my Lewis and Clark journey, because that's where Lewis took his own life on October 11th, 1809. I've been there 3 or 4 times before, but I had originally hoped that I would be able to take my Airstream now on the return, go all the way out from Virginia to Astoria, across the continent, turn around, come back, brief stay in Bismarck, and I hope now that I would be able to go to St. Louis, Kansas City, Nashville, to do that route and to stop at the Natchez Trace where Lewis took his life. I will do that one way or the other. It's not quite clear how to. I'll probably just drive a car for that one because it will be so much quicker and more nimble. There are issues with driving an Airstream. You can't stop on a dime. You can't turn around quickly. When I'm in my Honda, I'm a road anarchist. I see something I want to photograph, I zip past it, go off on look in the mirrors, of course, and then go off on the shoulder, wait, turn, do a U-turn, head back, make another U-turn, take some photographs. I do that 20 times a day, or see a gravel road going up somewhere and think, that looks so interesting, and then just do it. Well, you can't do that when you're hauling an Airstream, hauling a trailer. There's a different responsibility. There's a different turn ratio, of course. You don't want to just be rattling that thing over gravel all the time. You can do it sometimes, but it's really hard on everything, and it shakes things up pretty badly. So an automobile is a more nimble exploration device. Lewis was always happiest when he got off of the keelboat and then walked on shore, and that's where he made his greatest discoveries. That's where his pen opened up and flowed in its most beautiful way. So I get it. There's not just one way to see America. And one of the things I've learned is that RV parks are very convenient. Electricity, water, usually sewer. You can buy propane. There's usually a little shop where you can get Jiffy Pop or a can of beef stew or some orange juice, some Dippin' Dots. But there's a sort of sameness to the kind of culture that you see in an RV campground, and the kind of people who are wealthy enough to have rigs. And believe me, mine is a modest RV, a very modest RV compared to what you see there, the 300, 400, $500,000 bus-like RVs. The kind of people you see there are wealthy, retired mostly, more conservative than not, frequently MAGA. You don't see many young couples because they would have teardrop trailers, if any, or are camping in the national parks and national forests. And so an RV journey through RV campgrounds skews right, and you just have to accept that. I've met probably a dozen people that weren't conservative Republicans. Now, probably many more out there, but I've talked to a couple hundred people in the last year, and almost all of them say that the country can possibly be saved now that Donald Trump is the president of the United States, and the socialists, the communists, the leftists, the woke community, the cancel culture, the snowflakes, now that they have been removed from power. And we have a man of action who's not afraid to break a bunch of eggs. Their view is that we're likely to be saved. And so I don't ever quarrel with any of these people, of course. I'm just eager to listen. But the listening gets to be a little bit homogenous. And when I ask for follow-up, like, what has he done that's so good? Well, they'll say the border, and they'll say crime, and they'll say, punishing Harvard, and so on. But then if I say, what has he done for you? They might say the tax cut. I think everyone's pretty tentative about that. I think we all know that the tax cut was really for the very, very rich. Many people tell me, I don't really like the way he shoots off his mouth, and he talks too much, and he's irresponsible sometimes with his rhetoric. But I admire his policies and agree with them. That's a very common view. It used to be much more common than it is now. Now I think we're all so used to it. We're also numbed by Trump speak that it ceased to be the factor that it once was. I think we now know that this is a wild man, a deliberate disruptor. So that's not a full report on what America's thinking. You need to go to many different places to see America, and I've been largely in the less populated parts, not much time in cities, and I've been in these RV campgrounds, which are largely of a conservative demographic. However, I'm not whining. Let me give you a sense of a day. I'll get up at 6 or 6:30, get out of bed, take care of a few personal matters, maybe shower then, maybe shower later, get myself a Diet Coke out of the spectacular refrigerator, or make a cup of coffee. Then I sit down at my desk, at the dinette desk, and I read or write or take notes or do map study or something for an hour or two. Then, usually around 8:30 or 9, I will shower, and the shower is exquisite. You need to get out of the campground if you're not staying a second night by 11, and so it takes me about 15 minutes to strike camp. It takes some of these people an hour to strike camp, and sometimes more, because they have such complicated rigs and so many ways of hooking up and deploying, slide outs that have to be pulled back in, and all television antennas that they have to stack into some cubby on the side of the RV, and many other things that they have to do to get out of there. But I get out in about 15 minutes, and then I drive 150 or 200 miles, sometimes 300 miles, but some distance, 4 or 5 hours of driving. That means at least one tank of gas, and often two. Gas was inexpensive this year. It hovered around $3.50 per gallon. It was almost $6 in California, and $5 in some places in Washington State, but in the rest of the country under $4. and so not as serious a blow every day as it was last year. And then at some point, I'll get to a place where I'm going to set up camp, and I will have stopped probably at a little grocery store somewhere and bought hamburger or piece of chicken or materials for salad, a loaf of bread, whatever. And then I get to the campsite, and it takes about, you check in, that takes about 10 minutes. They often insist on having you be escorted to your campsite by a golf cart. And however tedious this is, they're very bent on it. And so you do that. And then it takes me about really only 10 minutes to hook up. And here's what you do. You make sure you're level enough. And I'm not a level obsessive. Some of these people have leveling systems, and the very expensive units, they're pneumatic. So you just push buttons and they will auto level. But for most people, there are a series of struts, and then they have these plastic things, and it's usually a couple, and the husband is at the wheel, and the wife is back, and she's telling him how to back up, and they get into a kind of a shouting match over this for a while. But eventually, but I just find a level spot, and it's almost always level enough, and then I hook up the electricity, which takes about 3 minutes. I hook up water, which takes about 2 minutes or 3 minutes. I will, not every night, but occasionally hook up the sewer. And let me say that all of the water that I discharge from my RV is non-black water. It is the gray water. It is shower water and sink water. Um, I, I do not wish to make my bathroom in my RV. That's a bit silly, maybe, since it has a perfectly good toilet. But I just don't like the idea of sloshing sewage down below the thing and then dealing with it, of course, because it has to go somewhere. Now, some of these gazillion-dollar RVs not only have a couple of bathrooms, of course, but, and this gets a little icky, but the sewage that goes down into a tank, there's a mixer down there. There's a way of turning it into a slurry. So whatever you put down there is, just think of kind of like a spatula mixer, or an ice cream maker, and it slurries it up. So then it becomes this disgusting black-brown, urine-colored slurry that can come out through a smaller pipe into the sewage system. Yuck. Not for me. Thank you very much. So it takes me no more than 15 minutes to set up. If I need to have the pickup, then I decouple. And decoupling takes 10 minutes. If I'm not going to go anywhere, if I don't have any special needs, I don't decouple for two reasons. First of all, it makes it so much easier the next day when you don't have to monkey around, because it involves not only the hitch, but some struts, a couple of other procedures. If you just stay hooked up, you don't have to worry about that. So it saves time. But the second reason is stability. So there are high winds out on the Great Plains sometimes, or throughout the American West. And by keeping the pickup hooked up, it means that it's going to take a tornado to push that trailer anywhere, and that gives me a sense of security.
We need to take a short break. I'm going to be right back with more of Clay's day in the life of an RV drifter when we come back on this episode of Listening to America. Welcome back to Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. We are in the middle of finding out what it's like to live as an RV drifter following the Lewis and Clark Trail in a 23-foot Airstream. Clay takes us through his day in the life out on the Lewis and Clark Trail.
Maybe read more, take care of some email. I do have a Starlink system, so I will often deploy that. That takes more time than other things, because you have to position it and then find a satellite, and it takes a bit of monkeying around. I'd say it takes at least 15 minutes to get right. But once you have it, you've got state of the art connectivity. And what I've learned is that these RV parks have very weak connectivity, and they will often say to you when you check in, now the internet works, but it works better in some parts of the campground than others, and we ask you not to be streaming anything because it's really just meant for email and looking up stuff on Google. And so that tells you a good deal about it. So having my own is a great luxury, whatever you think of the person who made it possible. But it really helps. And in fact, I would not have been able to do my journey without Starlink. It's essential to my work, partly to check in. Now, I do know how to go to like a Starbucks or other places and poach. Perfectly happy to do that. But when you're hauling an Airstream, that makes for some parking issues, but also, you might need to do something at 10 o'clock at night, and now you're in a campground. So the Starlink uh, is really an extraordinary tool that made my 2 years of journeys possible. And my good friend Dale uh, sponsored that because he needed to keep in touch with me. So, and that he's just a great guy. Vale, Dale Vale, Dale of Vale, Vale's Dale, Dale. Thank you, Dale. So then I'm all set up. About 5 o'clock, I pour myself a glass of white wine, or maybe I make a light gin and tonic, and then I usually walk around the campground. And you walk around the campground, you see all the varieties of RVs and their weird names: Arctic Fox, and manliness, and adventure, and that sort of thing. Um, and most of the people in them are timid people in their 60s who go to bed at 9, but still they like those really strong, very virile names. They don't add those names. Those names are part of the branding of these RVs. But I don't think I could buy one that put me in a heroic light. I call mine Rocinante, which is the name of Don Quixote's horse in the great Cervantes 1605 classic Don Quixote. And I only chose it, I chose it for two reasons. First, John Steinbeck called his truck camper Rocinante because he saw his journey as a quixotic journey. In other words, tilting at windmills, that there's something faintly absurd about it. So he called his rig Rocinante, and therefore I do too. But also Thomas Jefferson spoke, because he knew Cervantes' book, and he spoke of, in fact, he read it. He read it on his 19-day journey from Boston to France in 1784. He said that he learned Spanish along the way. John Quincy Adams said of Jefferson, Jefferson tells very tall stories, but I'm sure he learned enough Spanish along the way to piece his way through um, Cervantes' Don Quixote. So he spoke of, at one point in one of his many retirements, of putting Rocinante in his stall, in other words, retiring. Anyway, so I walk around. Occasionally, I'll say, "Hey, how's it going?" Or "Nice rig," or "Where are you headed?" And people will sometimes come up to me and say, "Hey, is that your Airstream? I looked up Listening to America. It's interesting." Or, "What is Listening to America exactly?" Which always leads to a good conversation. And I tell them, I give them a little bit of literature, as we say, and tell them to look it up and see what they think. And I don't hear much from most people after that, but having the title on the side of the RV has really been a blessing, because it does advertise what we're trying to get at here, trying to make sense of this great country as it approaches its 250th birthday. And then, having spent 45 minutes or so walking a couple of loops around the campground, I will decide what to do about dinner. Interestingly, I often just have chips and salsa, or cheese and crackers, or something of that sort, maybe like an hors d'oeuvre tray. I cook spaghetti about once a week, and so I buy it, of course, but then I add onions and other things to it. and it's easy to do. I try to do cooking with as little cleanup as necessary. I don't do anything that requires frying inside. I don't want that sheen of oil inside that small contained space. So I will boil water on the stove and I will cook maybe brownies or banana bread or something, maybe a pizza from time to time in the stove oven, which is quite nice. But I don't ever like do bacon or brown hamburger or cook steaks there. I just don't want that vibe. That I don't want to pollute this space. So I have a portable grill, which works perfectly well, and I do that out on the picnic table. Interestingly enough, not all RV parks have picnic tables, and so that's sort of a liability. I think people are increasingly living indoors, not only in their houses, back home, wherever that might be, but indoors in their rigs. And so there isn't a lot of activity in an RV park after 8 p.m. Um, Now, the KOAs have a more family centered approach, and so you will sometimes hear that going on until dusk. But on the whole, these are as quiet places as you can imagine. It's much different, for example, than going into a national park campground, which is just like a zoo. People play music too loudly. There's a lot of laughter and raucousness. People will fire bottle rockets, even though it's illegal. There's a lot of chaos in an RV. There's a lot of chaos in a national park campground, often enough. So I prefer national forest. If you get out in the national forest, you get into those campgrounds. Those are heavenly. I would spend every night in a national forest campground if it were possible to do it. They're not in every state. North Dakota has very few, for example, and also they often require reservations, sometimes well in advance, and I need some more spontaneity, etc., etc. But my favorite nights are in quiet national forest campgrounds where you feel more or less alone. And here's the fun of that. If it's hot enough, and it has been all summer, you can shower outside. The rig has an outside shower. You open up a little cabinet, and out comes this white shower head on a hose that's about 8 feet long, 6 feet long, and you can hook it up right there, or you can just hold it over your head. And there's no one looking because you're in a national forest campground, so you don't have to worry about your nudity. And showering outside is so pleasant. And then the minute it's over, you dry off in 10 minutes. Um, it's a lovely, lovely thing to do. So now I've eaten and I clean up. You always clean up immediately. You do not want to wait to clean up the next day. This is a discipline of minimalism and limited gear. And so you might as well just clean up those dishes immediately and put them away, because if you don't, then in the morning, then the spaghetti sauce is probably stuck on the side of the pan and so on and so forth. So I do that. I go back to the dining table and read until, say, 8:30 or 9 or even 10. And then my back is not happy because the dinette, I wish, the one liability, the one thing I don't like about my RV is that there isn't enough space for a reading chair. If I could adjust that somehow and have a really, even if it's a narrow reading chair inside, that would make a great deal of difference, because I just can't sit up straight that way any longer. So then I move to the bed. I have 5 or 6 pillows, so I have a way of, really making it a reading space. And there are 2 wonderful reading lamps, tiny lights that are on either side, so you can read essentially in the dark. And the rig is quiet. There's a heater if you need it. I wouldn't run an air conditioner after dusk anywhere. Well, once when I was in Death Valley, but that's just an obnoxious noise for oneself and one's neighbors. I do window control, so I open the windows. There are fans that are relatively quiet. You get used to them. And then I read for as long as I can. And that could mean 2 hours. It could mean 4 minutes. It's somewhere in between, and it's closer, I can tell you, to 4 minutes than to 2 hours. I usually can read for 35 or 40 minutes, and then I'm just tired and drift off. Put the book beside me in the bed in case I wake up. Sleep through the night. Get up at 6. Rinse and repeat. It's an amazing way to live. I could live this way, I think, if I had like a super secretary administrative assistant who could meet me once every 3 weeks, bring the mail, bring new books, take some of the things I don't need any longer, bring things that I now do need, get me caught up, go away and take care of some tasks for me. Then I could live this way. When I see people that stay in RV sites for like months, I'm always kind of surprised. Some of them are workers. Some of them are just people that don't have a home and they find it somewhat less expensive to do this. Some of them are just kind of snowbirds. They've come from Vermont or they come from North Dakota or Montana and they go down to Tucson and winter there in these RV parks. I'm surprised at how many people are there for weeks at a time, because I have always regarded an RV campground as sort of a transient thing, and it is for some, but in many of them, at least half is sort of what I would call semi-permanent people. I camped in Joliet, Illinois last year, next to a small, old-fashioned, sort of clunky 1960s trailer, and the man in it told me he'd been there for 34 years. Wow. That's a long time to be in an RV park, but apparently it worked for him. And he was, I think, not well um, off economically. And he said that he worked in the RV park mowing lawns and doing that sort of thing as part of paying his slip rate. So who knows what he had to pay. Maybe it was close to free, but it worked for him. And often I see people, camp hosts, and not just the camp hosts, but others who say work for the KOA or work for the campground in various ways in exchange for being able to stay there for the summer. And I say, of course, more power to them. So now I got home the other day, and the rig is parked out in my backyard. I have a second lot, and it's out there because I don't have an RV bay, and I'm not quite ready yet to put it into winter storage. So it's out there, and I've been cleaning it out and shocked, ashamed at how much stuff is in it. I mean, really ashamed. And so I vowed that when I go out again next year, I'm going to take much less. For example, in the closet, I found 11 pairs of trousers. I'll wear the same pair of khakis, sort of canvas trousers, 4, 5, 6 days in a row. So why do I need 11? I need 3 at most, or maybe a good pair of slacks and a couple of these cargo pants. I wear a blue work shirt or another blue shirt, occasionally a black shirt, 2, 3 days, at least one day. So probably you need 6 shirts. So if you add all that up, it's about a fifth of what I took with me. And when I was unloading, I found things. Oh, there's that shirt. Oh, there's that jacket. And so when that happens, when you're so laden that you discover things as you clean it out, that's too much. And if you can't find something, and you're going to go buy it again, or have to do without it. Right now, I'm looking for one of my 7 copies in this house of Lewis and Clark Among the Indians by James Rhonda. I need it. I haven't been able to find it. I know it's here, but there are stacks of stuff I brought in. It would take probably, if I spent the next hour looking for it, I would find one of the copies. But that's what lack of organization will bring to you. So it goes. So the rig is clean. It's low power. I stopped the refrigerator for now. There are a few systems that continue to operate, but at a very low wattage. There are solar panels, and so they probably provide just enough electricity to keep that going. I've got a few more loads to take out of the pickup and the RV, and then I'll be ready in the morning to get up and head back out to the Missouri River in east central Montana. I've also got hundreds and hundreds of pages of notes on yellow legal narrow line pads, and they're just scattered everywhere. And the first thing I need to do when I finally get home for a week is to gather them all up, put them in the correct files, so that I will have them. And this is an imperative, because if I don't, then 2 months from now, I'll think, well, what happened to that? I thought I read that. I thought I took notes on that, volume 11, the White House Journal. Where are those notes? No, I need them, or now I have to start over, or I can't find what I need. So you have to be organized, and that's not my best suit. I think I'm pretty well mentally organized, but physically, not so much. So I've got all that to do, and I'm also downsizing. I made a pact with myself last January at the Lewis and Clark retreat on Walden that I would downsize 5 things per day, and of course I've been gone for 100 days, so I need, and I did get ahead of myself before that, but I probably need to get rid of 350 things now. Now that can be as small as an old jackknife or the 7th copy of Anna Karenina. But still, that's a lot of things, and I'm trying to get down to this spot where everything in my house can be in the place where it's supposed to be without strain. And that would be downsizing by about 30%, I would say. So, wish me luck. But I'm dedicated to do it because A, I'm not growing any younger, and B, it is the case that if I can't find Lewis and Clark Among the Indians, I will order a new copy. Now, I'm not going to do that, of course, because I have at least 7 in this place somewhere. But you take my point. If it were another book, if it were, let's say Joyce's Ulysses, and I couldn't find it, I'd be right on there ordering a new copy. Preferably one with different annotations or different introductions or whatever, so that there would be some added benefit. But nevertheless, if you can't find it in my world, you're going to order it. And that's in North Dakota. If you lived in Seattle or Boston, of course you should go to an independent bookstore then. We don't have such here. But if you're in those places and you order from Amazon, it could be there that afternoon, certainly the next day. In North Dakota, it takes 2 or 3 days, sometimes 5 or 6 for those things to get to me. And when I come home from a trip, there's always a stack. My friend Sarah will stop by to make sure the house is still here, and she will then bring the boxes inside to keep them out of the weather, and also to stop advertising to all house thieves that Mr. Jenkinson is gone. Have at it. So it's all good. My plan is to overcome some of my own weaknesses, and they're myriad. So you work on them one at a time. I'm back. I'm delighted. I'm a little tired, but I'm thrilled. I love this country. I love what is possible in this initiative under Listening to America. I love that you are following along. Please tell everyone you know. We're just getting started here. So we'll see you next week for another important edition of Listening to America. I'm Clay Jenkinson.